ability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hi, this is Dick Shanley, and for the next hour I'll be reading from Sunday, August 16th issue of the New York Times Opinion section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The first article is written by Michelle Goldberg. When the extraordinary is ordinary. Because this is a family newspaper, I cannot quote the piquant term that Brandon Herrera, a Republican House candidate in Texas, used to refer to children in a 2003 video. I can only impart that he called them trophies for getting a man to ejaculate. Nor, alas, am I allowed to repeat the obscenities that Herrera, a gun influencer, used to explain why the opinions of mothers are without value. I can only say that he argued that getting pregnant requires no skill at all. A few weeks ago, ahead of a fundraiser that Mike Johnson, the House Speaker, was holding for Herrera, the Austin American-Statesman asked Herrera's campaign about those resurfaced comments. Herrera's team responded with a crude visual pun that once again is too vulgar for me to describe here. I can tell you about the Nazi and eugenics stuff. In a 2022 video, Herrera tested a Nazi-era submachine gun, then goose-stepped to a Nazi marching song. He called for the weapon, the original ghetto blaster. In a 2024 podcast, after calling for abolishing Social Security, he joked that we should also abolish old people, laughing along as his co-host riffed about killing them off, as in the horror film Midsommar. Herrera became the Republican nominee in South Texas District in March, after the sitting congressman withdrew to a sexual harassment scandal. Somehow, unlike Graham Planter, the main Democrat, Herrera hasn't become a household name. I haven't seen much public hand-wringing about the decision of the pious Johnson to raise money for Herrera, nor debate about what his candidacy means for the Republican Party. That Herrera has flown under the radar is testament to a fundamental asymmetry between the parties as well as the discourse about them. Thanks to President Trump, misogyny and extremism among Republicans has become what journalists someone call a dog bites man story. Something so ordinary and predictable that it breaks through only when it reaches an absurdly high threshold. I regularly speak of people who follow politics closely but haven't heard of Corey Mills, a Republican representative running for re-election in Florida. One ex-girlfriend of Mills won a restraining order against him for saying he threatened her with revenge porn. Another told the police he assaulted her, although later recanted. He denies both charges. Mills is under investigation by the House Ethics Committee over allegations of both sexual misconduct and campaign finance violations. Yet, it barely made a stir when Trump endorsed him in Tuesday's Republican primary. Max Miller, Republican congressman from Ohio, has in recent weeks finally breached what we might call the bad even for Republican line due to allegations of truly hoary abuse of his ex-wife, Emily Marino, and his daughter, Marino, whose father is Ohio senior Republican Senator Bernie Marino, claimed that Miller held a gun to her head, threw scalding water, and broke her 2-year-old's collarbone. The other women have also accused him of abuse. He denies all these allegations. In a statement last month, Bernie Marino wrote that Miller is a danger to my daughter, and I hold my breath every minute he has custody of my grandchildren. If there are any basic standards of character required to hold elected office, Max Miller fails them. The key word there was if. Trump often seems to be trying to show that, especially when it comes to the treatment of women and girls, there are no such standards. By now, it's tedious to recount all the time he has faced sexual assault allegations, or to put that as Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth paid off a Republican woman who said he raped her, though he denied the assault. As the Bulwark's Tim Miller often points out, Trump is devoid of empathy toward almost everyone except those accused of abusing women. His grace even at times extends to Democrats. When a woman said that Plattner had raped her, which Plattner denies, Trump responded, "A lot of people say big falsehood." Trump endorsed the former football star Herschel Walker in the 2012 Republican state primary, even though his ex-wife, like Emily Moreno, said the candidate had put a gun to her head. So it's not surprising that while Trump reportedly called Max Miller to express concern about his candidacy, he never publicly urged him to drop out. Indeed, Politico reported that Trump's team intervened to stop other Republicans from pressuring Miller to leave the race. Despite the hopes of Bernie Moreno, Republicans have shown that they do not consider Miller beyond the pale. In such a party, one that stands above all for male impunity. Someone like Brandon Herrera barely stands out. Democrats recently moved Herrera's district onto their target list, convinced that his comments created opportunities for Caddy Padilla, Stout, an attorney and former teacher, to flip the seat. So far, according to the Democratic Congressional Committee, no Republican has broken ranks to endorse her. This is predictable in what ways that matter. Herrera is one of the party's own. Pardon me. Next article is written by Nicholas Kristof. He's one of my favorites, although all of these journalists are my favorites. Where the teacher is a hero. Crystal Barnes teaches high school biology in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And in March, she had a student who kept falling asleep in class. Barnes could have scolded the girl, sent her to the principal's office, simply let her fail. Instead, she asked the student why she was always so sleepy. Turned out that the girl's parents were out of the picture, though she had sent to live with her grandma. The grandma didn't have a bed for her, so the girl didn't get much sleep. Barnes then bought a bed frame and mattress, topper, and Amazon for $119 and a mattress for $43 from a shop who gave a discount when he heard the purpose. Barnes made the purchase with savings from her $50,000-a-year teacher salary. Another teacher contributed sheets and a comforter. Barnes went to the girl's house and set up the bed and found the termites were devouring the house and that the electricity had been turned off for non-payment of bills. And the student was also helping to raise 2 younger children living in the house. The girl was very grateful for the bed, but had one more worry. Can you give me some food? Barnes remembered her asking, I'm hungry. The student's plight effectively orphaned, no bed to sleep in, no little food to eat, dozing in class in an impoverished school district that the state rated as failing, in reminder of how many American children face imminent challenges. This is my life that it's going to be for me, and hey, that's all, and that's it, Barnes recalled the girl telling her. Those challenges and our national failure to address them were the topic of my recent trip from a 1,000-mile road trip from Oklahoma to Kentucky. As I interviewed one desperate young person after another, I fumed that we squandered tens of billions of dollars bombing Iran, but couldn't afford modest sums to adequately feed and educate hungry American children. That national failure is acute. But something more must be said. There's another side of America that you also see in towns like Pine Bluff. It's the ordinary heroes like Barnes who step up to help. Barnes can't help the crisis caused by the Trump administration's pushing 1.5 million children off food stamps over the last year, but she buys snacks with her own money and keeps a cart of them in her classroom for hungry children like her sleepy student. It's not a solution, it's not enough, but it's something. It's a way of pushing back at the night. This is my annual winter trip journey where I take a university student along on a reporting trip. I wanted my winner, Brunella Tips Mania, available to see the most critical needs and failings of this country. But I also wanted her to see the heroic responses of volunteers and donors. I see leadership so much in Washington as at America's grassroots. Our president and his family are enriching themselves, even as he cuts funds supporting struggling families. But many ordinary Americans like Barnes are reaching into their own pockets to try to meet the needs of those with less. I'm awed by the church-run pantries, volunteer mentoring programs, after-school sports leagues coached by moms and dads, the army of good-hearted people across the country who try to keep their fingers in the dike. This is what Tocqueville admired about America almost 2 centuries ago, and it remains one of our strengths. Editorial comment, it doesn't matter what party you belong to. These are sad, sad stories that we're spending so much, and we're going to perhaps spend money and build 5 Arctic ships or build new aircraft carriers when we don't need them. And then little folks like this don't get enough to eat. It's baffling. I see leadership not so much in Washington as in America grassroots. Our president and his family are enriching themselves, even though he cuts funds supporting struggling families. Yes, this is a dispiriting time. 2/3 of Americans say our country is pretty seriously on the wrong track. But maybe we can find a dollop of inspiration from those who selflessly step up to what they can. Their efforts ripple through the lives of others in ways that are difficult to foresee. Why is Barnes a dedicated teacher? In parts because when she was a teenager, pregnant at 15, she found a refuge in a nonprofit called TOPS, T-O-P-P-S, for targeting our people's priorities with service. It was founded in 2022 by Annette Dove, a former teacher who went to help young people hungry for food and guidance. I described Dove as America's Mother Teresa. Dove provided food for Barnes' son and later after-school tutoring and guidance while mentoring Barnes and helping her graduate from high school and then from college. It was life-changing for me, Barnes said, and now in turn she helps young people through TOPS. People make bad choices, she acknowledged, but she also questions whether young people are set up to make the proper choices, so she decided to repay the help she got by becoming a teacher, the kind who feeds her students. Secular liberals point to the hypocrisy of some evangelical Christians who proclaim their piety while acting as if Jesus' central message were about banning abortion or shunning gay people rather than feeding the hungry and healing the sick. The criticism seems fair to me. White evangelists have been strong supporters of President Trump, even as he cut food stamps and Medicaid. Yes, it's also true that in small-town America, programs help the homeless and hungry are often organized by churches, including evangelical ones, founded by the generosity of conservative Christians who tithe 10% of their incomes. In a complicated world, those efforts deserve admiration, respect, and thanks. Before I found out about this place, I was struggling, Martha McNeil, 30, told me, as she gathered groceries at Caring Community Friends, an anti-poverty nonprofit in Sapulpa, Oregon, for her 3 children. The group's food pantry, backed by local churches and business, operates 4 days a week and is staffed in part by 20 regular volunteers. Patria also runs a community garden and a Christmas shop for children's gifts. Local churches are a pillar of this, said Lynette Johnson, a greeter at the Patria. They call and say, hey, we have a new family with no food. And we step in. To me, morality encompasses both personal behavior and public positions, so I wish that more religious conservatives would support government programs for the needy and that secular liberals were more personally charitable. Giving patterns we are complex, but researchers have generally found that conservatives donate more to charities largely because of religious giving. Secular liberals are generous with government funds, but less so with their own money. And nonprofits can provide opportunities to transfer lives. I saw that in Manchester, Kentucky, an area hard by drugs and loss of coal mining, where I met an astonishing young man named Dylan Grace. Grace's father was never around, he said, and Grace has lost his mom and sister, plus a brother who was shot and killed. Now 18, Grace lives in a dilapidated home with his stepfather, whom he said does odd jobs like earns $400 or $500 in really a good month. The household had its 500 month in food stamps cut off in May, apparently part of a nationwide crackdown under Trump that has trimmed about 11% of recipients from food stamps over the year. We've had to cut back on luxury foods, Grace. I asked for an example of luxury food. Frozen lasagna, he offered. Yet Grace is determined. He worked 40 hours a week in high school while excelling academically and finding time to earn college credits online. This summer he's working full-time at a Dime General, $10 an hour. Grace attends Alice Lloyd College on a full scholarship from the school and a program called the Thompson Scholars Foundation, which works with Save the Children and supports young people. In Appalachia, with mentoring and scholarships, Grace is hoping to be an elementary school teacher because his own teacher so inspired him, especially an English teacher who treated all her students with great respect and dignity, he said. Bravo to the donors of Thompson Scholars and Save the Children, for they have transformed Grace's life and perhaps those children he will teach for decades to come. But while driving on the road trip, I kept thinking, when we built an interstate highway that revolutionized America, we didn't rely on volunteers each paving 100 square feet of road. Rather, we had the government invest in highways that knit parties together because it was a national priority. It seems to me that it should be just as much a priority today to ensure that our children are fed and educated and have a fair shot at life. That, too, might knit our country together and help rekindle the American dream. When you read that, it's disgraceful that the SNAP program was decreased by 11%. You have to wonder what kind of conscience or our lawmakers have. Without its great rivers, Europe will be weaker and poorer. All across Europe, shipwrecks and skeletons are rising from the deep. Near Pravoho, Serbia, Nazi ships scuttled in 1944, now lying broken backed in sandbanks. In Croatia, a 1930 cargo ship protruded from the water. On the newly exposed riverbed of the Danube in Bulgaria, what local experts say is most likely part of the skeleton of an ancient mammoth was found scattered across the sand like discarded bones after a giant's picnic. Much of Europe is in the middle of a severe drought, and major rivers have been reduced to a fraction of their usual size. Europe's second longest river, the Danube, is now facing record low, recently measuring just 9 inches deep in Budapest. Part of Italy's mighty Po River is also at record summertime low, and the Rhine, A major outlet for trade flowing from the Alps to the North Sea is now shale ore at any time since record keeping began. This summer, the transport of chemicals, oil products, and other goods on the Rhine and the Danube ground almost to a halt. Romania shut down a nuclear plant cooled by the Danube, and as of Friday, Hungary narrowly avoided doing so. The car makers Stasi and Ford agreed to temporarily cease production in the Romanian factories to save power. To some in Europe, climate change seemed like the problem that mainly affected faraway places. In recent years, wildfires on the continent, together with the heat wave and the drying of the rivers, have brought it home, where it's beginning to alter the old map of Europe's power and wealth. If the Rhine and Danube run even drier, the map will have to be withdrawn. Over the past 80 years or so, these rivers have served as the crucible of the continent's industrial power and outlets for its trade. German industry, which powered the country's famous post-war growth, was heavily concentrated around the confluence of the Rhine and Ruhr. The port at the Rhine's mouth in the Netherlands rose to become the busiest in Europe. The continent's rivers also provide power for millions, and the Danube serves as a critical export route for Ukraine's crops and a supply route for its military. Against this backdrop, the dying of the rivers presents not only an ecological hazard, but a major strategic challenge for Europe at a time when fresh problems are as welcome as old bombs revealed on a riverbed. Europe already is struggling to deal with a once-in-a-generation economic transformation. The rise of Chinese high-tech manufacturing and electric vehicles in particular, which threaten European auto icons such as Volkswagen and Porsche. Simultaneously, it is wrestling with a major energy transformation as it seeks to curb its addiction to Russian gas while pivoting to renewables, including wind and solar. In the face of President Trump's nationalism and the aggression of President Putin of Russia, Europe is cutting its reliance on U.S. defense assets in favor of greater self-reliance. Conflicts in the Middle East and the closing of the Strait of Hormuz have real weaknesses in supply chains. In conversation about how to respond, the buzzwords most overused in Europe headquarters in Brussels are strategic autonomy. The idea that Europe will reduce reliance on foreign goods and military protection, meet the challenge of a rising China and a menacing Russia, and deploy new technology to deliver a future that is greener, wealthier, healthier. On paper, these are worthy goals. The problem is that the continent's leaders seem to assume that Europe's physical geography remain unchanged, and that the huge advantage afforded by the rivers such as the Rhine and the Danube can be taken for granted. Those advantages include the ability to transport goods across the continent at low cost, easy access to the ports in places such as Hamburg and Rotterdam, and unlimited access to fresh water for manufacturing, hydropower, and cooling nuclear power plants. Now it's rapidly becoming clear that the terrain on which Europeans live, work, and travel is changing before our eyes. Rivers can no longer be relied on to provide an inexpensive, reliable, relatively low-carbon alternative to road and air freight. Rivers cannot form the industrial backbone of the European Union's push for autonomy from Chinese and American supply chains if they run dry, nor can they provide reliable energy independence or guaranteed food security. Responding to these changes will not be easy, just as the war in Iran is forcing Middle Eastern countries to develop new supply lines and export routes. Europe needs to think seriously about how to develop alternative transport and energy networks that reduce its reliance on rivers that could take decades and require huge investments in new infrastructure. Some places that grew rich through waterborne trade, such as the German Rhineland or Rotterdam, may lose out. and rivers may be no longer bind the European neighbors in ways that made it easier to avoid relying on the outside world. Take away Europe's blue highways and all the grand talk about building new industry, finding new trading partners, and generating clean energy begins to look rather hollow. One Dutch satirical outlet recently suggested that firefighting helicopters to refill the Rhine. That may be unlikely, but it's clear that Europe needs to begin thinking about its rivers more radically and more seriously, as a strategic asset rather than just an environmental sob story. Is Ocasio-Cortez ready for the glass cliff? Running for president as a woman differently from every woman before her. Oh, she's running. I've been watching the signs that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez may be considering a bid for president for over a year. She spoke about foreign policy at the Munich Security Conference in February. A few months later, she brandished her organizer street creed with a visit to a rural Georgia community fighting a data center. She is among the astonishingly few big-name Democrats embracing data centers' resistance, a rare point of bipartisan agreement in a divided electorate. Last week, she all but soft launched the presidential bid so many of us has been expecting, with a video series about freezing her eggs. The rollout, personal, confessional, and intimate, had all the social media savvy that made her a political star. It also gets ahead of the inevitable question about how or if she will have children. In short, Ocasio-Cortez has crafted a political message in which the form and content suggest that she will run as a woman, but unlike how every woman before her was forced to run. To be a viable potential presidential candidate is no small feat for any woman, much less a young, attractive woman without political dynasty. Were she to formally declare a presidential bid, she would be one of the youngest and most progressive people to do it. She can run, but can she win? To say women had an easy path to presidential power would be an understatement. Hillary Clinton was both too unfathomable, a first lady who won it more, and too well known, saddled with her husband's scandals and positions. Kamala Harris was alternately too novel, a mixed-race black woman, too much like the same old capitalist hawk. They each were condemned as too uncharacteristic to overcome a culture that is supremely suspicious of women who want, pursue, and hold power. The ambition that brought them within reach of the presidency was a trap that ensured they couldn't win it. That is the gist of the years of women's political ambitions. A woman who wants the top job must be assertive, but not aggressive, nurturing, but not weak. She has to be the epitome of a mom and the epitome of a boss. It is impossible needle to thread, and any woman who confronts it herself to do it comes off as disingenuous at best and a liar at worst. This is a liability trap, has hindered every qualified woman who has run for president. But these are different times. Cortez is a different woman, and Americans love to turn to women when the house is burning down. Social scientists call it the glass cliff, the phenomenon in which women are recruited to lead failing companies. President Trump's businessman brand of governments has many Americans feeling this nation is failing. I suppose the dumpster fire or climate denialism, political corruption, and general scramminess of, well, everything would be dire enough circumstances to make a female president possible. In particular, Democrats, whom you might expect to be worried of placing another female candidate before the American public, are facing a political disaster of their own making. Americans are primed for an anti-incumbent electoral wave. They want an alternative to Trump's MAGA-dominated Republican Party, but a lot of them indicate they would have to hold their nose to vote for mainstream Democrats. This is the enemy of my enemy, my friend. Game between the base and party leaders has created an opening for progressive candidates in state races. Despite this, a lot of Democrats are faithful to conventional political wisdom, and they cannot win the White House by running from the left. Ocasio-Cortez is made for this moment. It's not because she has tempered the progressiveness, as some Democratic socialists worry. It's because she has the greatest chance of sidestepping liability trap that has foiled so many female presidents who come before her. Whether she wins or loses, if she runs as she governs, an Ocasio-Cortez campaign could model a new way for women to lead. Research on female candidates suggests that women who emphasize feminine traits are penalized, while women who talk about female issues are advantaged. Ocasio-Cortez does both. She has shown off her favorite red lippy on Instagram and has live streamed how government works for millions of people. There have been the usual consequences. Conservatives revile her, and even men who share her politics discount her gravitas. Too young, too pretty, too ambitious. But instead of changing to accommodate these men's discomfort, a quickie political marriage or a boxy power suit comes to mind. The self-described girl from the Bronx took it on like, well, a girl from the Bronx, with unabashed confidence in her ability to persist without permission. To doing so, she has fashioned female political power in a way that does not contort itself for male comfort. Many Americans expect the president to be a father for the nation. A woman in the White House is supposed to be his wife, his mom to his children, a political appendage, as opposed to a person who wields power in her own right. One reason Clinton's narrative never gelled with a lot of Americans is that she intended to amass power independent of her role as First Lady. Her role in leading health care reform was considered by many to be too significant a task for a First Lady, an unelected wife and mother. Not even in years as Secretary of State could append the idea that she somehow usurped power meant for men. Harris's campaign was a test of what makes a powerful woman legible, while a man who seemingly has no political ambition of his own stands behind her. However, she does not have biological children, even though she talked often about her stepchildren, calling her Momala. The idea of seeing her as the nation's first makeshift mother never fit. Her blended family was not rare. Many American families are now some of the traditional, meaning step-parents are a normal part of American life. But the presidential family is not supposed to be normal. It's supposed to be an aspirational, a secular symbol of Americans' religious belief that ours is a nation uniquely blessed by God to prosper and produce. Harris had the additional challenge being a woman of color. People might have hated Clinton for insisting she wasn't a stand-by-your-man little lady. But our culture has a legacy of hatred for women of color and our family formations. It isn't said often, but a right-wing politician vision that pairs a resurgent natalist movement with great replacement theory is one that encourages white women to marry young and multiply in a way that it does not for black or brown women. There is no edict for women of color to reproduce for this nation, because a large part of this nation would rather the nation not exist at all than be majority minority. This is why Ocasio-Cortez's choice to lead the campaign intentions with a very public discussion of reproduction choices is so important. She is performing the preservation of her status as a mom for the public, creating the possibility that she would be a mother for the nation, even if she's not yet a mother. However, she has recognized that whatever marriage or motherhood choices she makes, a New York Latino cannot embody the aspirational presidential family. Nothing she does will satisfy the haters, so instead she should chart a new path that presents new political possibilities. As often in the case, the best choice for a woman of color creates better choices for all women. The American right has conducted a national assault on abortion care, birth control access, and in vitro fertilization since the fall of Roe v. Wade. These are attacks on women's enfranchisement and ability to work. No woman has to consider which states allow her to control her reproductive decisions. Without her or a doctor going to prison is truly free. In the face of this, Ocasio-Cortez's decision to talk publicly about freezing her eggs is the kind of leadership women are hungry for. She is demonstrating that planning for a family while building the career she wants is still a compromise. She's implying that the best we can do right now is to plan for the worst while we work toward the best. She's also saying that reproductive health is a choice that a woman can make on her own, for her own reasons, without apology or censure. That's a message very different from the ones about family, gender, power that have bedeviled women's political campaigns. Ocasio-Cortez will have other, more workday political challenges to overcome. Despite what the right-wing media pundits said, she didn't totally bomb in Munich, but her speech this year at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta was still uncomfortable. It's easier to learn geopolitics than it is to become fluent in black Southern rhetoric. Black voters are pragmatic, but will have to reconcile progressive policies for cultures outside New York City to win. A Southern running mate who matches her vibe and brings that fluency, like Georgia's John Ossoff, would be a bold solution. Regardless, she will need to figure out how to speak to an electorate beyond her own. Maybe we aren't ready to finally join the long list of countries that have elected a woman to lead, but the best time to wish the test is when the opposition goes fat and lazy with winning. That's where the MAGA movement is now. It has control of both chambers of Congress, a favorable Supreme Court, and almost total presidential legal immunity. After 2004, when the so-called compassionate conservatives felt this inevitable, Barack Obama made history by a resounding countervailing force. As we learned in 2008, when history says it's your time, it's your time. Editorial comment. It truly would be interesting to have Ocasio elected. The nation deserves answers about Trump's health. Dick Cheney's heart problems were never a national secret. I was Mr. Cheney's colleaguist for 27 years, including his 2 terms as the vice president. During his time at the White House, he needed a stent, a defibrillator, and medical treatment for an arrhythmia and a blood clot in his leg. After the defibrillator was implanted on his chest in 2001, he would frequently show visitors to his Wake office a sample device provided to him by manufacturer. Mr. Cheney's candor about his health was an anomaly for American politics. Grover Clean underwent secret cancer surgery while he was president on board a yacht for maximum privacy. Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his use of a wheelchair from the public. Ahead of a campaign for a 4th term, he struggled with severe hypertension and congestive heart failure, but the public was told the president's health was excellent in all respects. Joe Biden's disastrous debate performance raised concerns that the White House had attempted to conceal the president's decline. For weeks after his hospitalization this summer, Senator Mitch McConnell shared almost no details about why he was absent. In June, President Trump celebrated his 80th birthday, and at the end of the term, he will be the oldest person ever to serve as the nation's leader. After Mitt Trump's medical evaluation in May, Dr. Sean Bella, the physician of the president, wrote that Mr. Trump remains in excellent health and in his demanding daily schedule, including multiple high-level meetings, public engagements, and regular physical activity, continues to support his overall well-being. Despite reassurances from the White House to the contrary, at times over the past year, the president has not looked well. I am not Mr. President's doctor and have reviewed only his records that have been made public, but Mr. Trump is probably the most photographed president in American history, and a variety of physical ailments are easy to see. He has large bruises on both hands, swelling in his legs, and episodes when it appears that he is struggling to stay awake. He's also had advanced imaging performed for unclear reasons. Public is again left to wonder whether the nation's leader is okay. Despite the unparalleled power afforded to the President of the United States, there is no formal requirement for the Commander-in-Chief to certify his fitness for duty. That's a mistake. Members of the military, Secret Service agents, commercial pilots, school bus drivers, and air traffic controllers all must periodically demonstrate that they are well enough to perform their work. The current practice for reporting the results of a current medical examination for the president began in Nixon, but it's only a custom, not a formal obligation, and as history has shown, it can be unreliable. If such a commission were in place today, there are some of the medical questions that could clarify concerning Mr. Trump's health. The American public deserves answers to all of them. Dr. Barbarella recent report states that the president was evaluated by 22 consultants, an extraordinary number of specialists for even the most extensive executive health evaluation. Mr. Trump often shows bruising of his hands, which the White House attributes to frequent handshaking and use of aspirin. Trauma from handshaking has never seemed plausible, and it doesn't explain why the president's left hand is often similarly discolored. Also, why would the president take a dose of aspirin 4 times as high as the dose typically recommended by doctors? Swelling in the president's legs last summer led to unscheduled medical evaluation. The president's physical to describe the problem as chronic venous insufficiency, a condition common in older people that results from leaky valves in the veins of the legs. It usually develops over a long period. But during Mr. Trump's comprehensive physical exam, Dr. Barbella documented no swelling in the legs. If that's true, his swelling would be a definition acute, not chronic. Acute leg swelling is potentially much more consequential, finding that can be caused by issue as heart and kidney disease. What's the reason? The president then appears to struggle to stay awake, a sign of condition doctors refer as excessive daytime somnolence. The problem, which is sometimes evident during Oval Office events, was not addressed in the report by Mr. Trump's comprehensive physical exam in May. Although the president is a renowned night owl, his sleepiness seems relatively new. There are several possible causes for the president's symptoms, some of which could have serious complications left untreated. Has the president medical team identified the source, and how are they addressing it? In October, Mr. Trump underwent advanced imaging of his heart and abdomen. The president's physician offered a vague description of the reasons for the test to identify issues early, confirm health, and ensure he maintains long-term vitality. Past Trump medical reports have disclosed the present use of the drug finasteride, which prevents hair loss. The drug was not mentioned in the report after Mr. Trump's most recent medical exam. In response to query from the Washington Post about its absence, the White House responded, "The current report reflects all medications deemed clinically relevant to disclose at this time. It does not matter in any material way if the president is or isn't taking a hair loss drug. The more important question is what medications prescribed for Mr. Trump, if any, has the White House decided to withhold from the public?" The president has spoken about how well he performs in cognitive testing. However, the exam that Mr. Trump describes, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, is a brief and basic screening tool with simple questions: draw a clock, identify a camel, often perform a response concern from the patient of a family. Why the president undergone this test numerous times? There have been more sophisticated neurocognitive assessments. Some people would argue that personal medical details are more than the public deserves to know. After all, Buckingham Palace does not reveal many details of King Charles' cancer or his treatment. But the United States does not have a king. In a representative democracy, the people must have confidence in the health of their leader and in the leader's capacity to guide the nation. We have been kept in the dark too long. I got out of Kabul, but I'll never truly escape it. Afghan women are still carrying the burden of Americans' evil. My hand shook as I crossed the stage to receive my master's diploma from Cornell University last year, wearing a graduation stole on which I had sewn an Afghan flag. I was filled with a jumble of pride and disbelief at how far I had come. 4 years before, I was among thousands of people evacuated from Afghanistan as its government collapsed and the Taliban seized Kabul, and I had since made the dizzying transition to a new life in America. But as I teetered across the stage in high heels, the sad, hopeless faces of my girlfriends who never made it out of Afghanistan flashed through my mind. This is the whiplash I live with now. Heights of freedom and newfound opportunity punctured by blows of intense grief. The fall of Kabul 5 years ago last week marked the bitter end to the long, painful 20-year U.S. war in Afghanistan. But the Afghan women, the pain was only beginning. The Taliban have turned my home into what a senior UN official has called the most repressive country in the world for women, who are barred from school and most types of work and face restrictions on simply appearing in public. I escaped all that. In America, I've been able to further my education and get a job. I've discovered the joys of cycling and jogging and ice skating and kayaking and weightlifting and many other pursuits unavailable to women back home. I even learned to swim. I have the freedom to go out each day unafraid of being punished for what I'm wearing, or who I am. But every freedom I enjoy reminds me of women in Afghanistan who lost theirs. In July, I bought myself an inflatable paddleboard for my 30th birthday. Propelling myself down the Potomac River, I reveled in a sense of power and independence, but my chest suddenly tightened as the face of a young girl came back to me. She's a family friend in Afghanistan, a bright, curious, promising girl. who devoured books that my mom gave her. But I just learned from Johnson Kabul that at just 16, she's to be married off to a much older man, no school, or even leaving home without a close male relative at her side. Afghan women were perhaps the largest beneficiary of U.S. intervention in Afghanistan. The Americans arrived in 2001, driving the previous Taliban regime from power. Soon after, I was able to start primary school, something that had been unimaginable under Taliban. The expansion of opportunities for women allowed me to graduate from law school in Afghanistan in 2020. I plan to start a career as an advocate for women who still face challenges such as domestic violence, but have few female lawyers to represent them. The U.S. withdrawals ended those dreams. I got out of Afghanistan only because my brother, Najim Rahim, had worked as a reporter for the New York Times. Anyone who was employed by Western news organizations or the U.S. military was at risk of Taliban reprisals, so the Times evacuated those who had worked for its Kabul bureau. Journalists, drivers, gardeners, translators, along with their direct family members. My family is having lunch at home on the day Kabul fell, contemplating what would happen to us under the Taliban. When my brother called, we were leaving Afghanistan. We had 20 minutes to pack one small bag per person before rushing the airport. I stared into my chest, suddenly forced to decide how to fit my life into a backpack. I grabbed some clothes, my school diploma, and a few hand scars. We waited for hours with other evacuees under a baking sun. As thousands thronged the airport, we watched horrified as desperate people clung to the exterior planes, falling as the aircraft took flight. That night, Taliban military attacked our group with clubs, and we had to run from the chaotic airport for our lives. 2 tense days later, we made it aboard a military transport. As we finally lifted off, I sat on the plane's cold metal floor, staring numbly at the windowless walls and the blank, fearful faces of people who were leaving behind everything they knew. Eventually, we landed in Houston and began the process of applying for asylum. As new possibilities opened up for us in America, Taliban decrees barred women and girls from receiving education after the 6th grade, required women to cover themselves head to toe in public, even prohibited them from speaking loudly enough for non-family members to hear them. In January, the Taliban approved a new criminal decree that the UN Commissioner for Human Rights said legitimized violence against women and children at home. Despite the ever-tightening restrictions, I keep in touch with friends back home through calls and video chats. A friend in Kabul told me how she and other women were working out in a secret gym last year when Taliban morality enforcers arrived. The women managed to escape out the back door before the Taliban burst in, sniffing at what they said was a telltale scent of perfume in the air. Most of the 35 young women who were in my most of the 35 young women who were in my all-female law school class are still in Afghanistan. During the calls, they pour out their frustration about their new lives as wives and moms. Spend almost entirely at home. They dreamed of becoming lawyers, now out of reach. That's where my bill comes in. Afghan women in America often return the same question. What if that were me? I was no smarter or more ambitious than many of my classmates, yet I got out purely through luck. I am determined to make the most of my freedom here and make my life's work to help the women left behind. Since leaving Afghanistan, the United States has closed its embassy, withdrawn its diplomats, sharply reduced assistance, and made it harder for Afghans to find refuge in America. It has increasingly disengaged from the country and its people. I'm grateful for the new life I have in the U.S. and for the kindness of the American people. I realize that Afghanistan no longer commands America's attention as it once did. And I won't pretend that there are easy solutions for helping Afghan women. But America has a moral responsibility not to simply look away and accept the systematic erasure of Afghan women is no longer its concerns. Another editorial comment. The United States has done a great deal of good for many people. But here we fight in Afghanistan, and the Afghanis who were helping America but couldn't get back, now they're persecuted by the Taliban. And then I'm sure that we cut back on it ratios. It's frightening a little at that time. In spite of our goodness, we've also been disingenuous at times. Morality in the Odyssey. To the editor, Nolan's Trojan Horse. In his analysis of Christopher Nolan's film, The Odyssey, Mr. Klein brilliantly extracted the director's message for today's audience from Homer's ancient poem. Mr. Nolan's finest trick, he writes, is to make one of the oldest moral rules sound new again by turning the best of Judeo-Christianity into the law of Zeus, so we can see what it might matter and what it might still have to say to us. Mr. Klein is right to say that Mr. Nolan smuggled the message in without most viewers even noticing. Most of the film's audience, including Elon Musk and even the renowned Odyssey translator Emily Will, who reviewed the film harshly in London review of books, misses what Mr. Klein sees. Odysseus and his men were not fighting the barbarians. They were the barbarians. By observing both the film and the world order and American democracy crumbling around us, Mr. Klein reminds us that we cannot make Western civilization or America great again by betraying its own fundamental values. Strength, rules, and order are necessary, but without compassion and empathy, we risk becoming the very thing we abhor. To the editor, The Trickster Makes a World. I was pleased that Ezra Klein found it useful in his recent essay. Behind Mr. Klein's essay lies a question I'm often asked. Is Donald Trump a trickster? Indeed, the mythological tricksters are among opportunists, shameless thieves, and liars, so there's a case to be made. But I have reservations. First, tricksters' tales are funny. Mr. Trump has no sense of humor. He can't take a joke. His wit is dehumanizing, fueled by insult and mockery. A trickster's win, by contrast, is all too human. Tells us not to be so self-important. Take the classic tale in which the day-old baby Hermes steals the cattle of Apollo. But when Apollo insists that Zeus punish the thief, the little god's denials are so witty. Zeus begins to laugh, and by the end of the story, the antagonists are friends. Seconds are the issue of who's in charge. In none of the old tales is a trickster the chief or king. He's too mischievous, stewing faces around the palace or stealing fruit from the royal gardens. He's a snake, an outsider, never the boss. Hermes is one of the last born of the Greek gods. He must be. Only after the cosmos has been put in order can he show up to bend or break the rules. He's a parasite on structure, not its author. Any kingdom foolish enough to put a trickster on the throne is in serious danger. You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from Sunday, August 16th, issue of the New York Times Opinion Section. We read from the New York Times Opinion Section every Sunday at 2 p.m. Your reader's been Dick Shanley. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of the New York Times Arts and Leisure section, followed at 4 by a rebroadcast of this morning's Buffalo News. Please stay for these readings and more throughout the day, and feel free to contact us with your comments, suggestions, with any questions you may have. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability,